Welcome to the Black Anarchist Podcast, a channel where critical thinkers come to learn and grow. Through pedagogical discussions, we challenge the status quo, conventional narratives, and present raw truth. I'm JC, author of The Black State Project, The Path to Sovereignty, Reparations, and Rebuilding Black Wall Street. Okay, so I actually finished this pamphlet earlier today. So I'm going to make it available tomorrow for free. It's only going to be available for one day. I'm going to post it on my community wall. Um, before I tried to do this, and I released it for 5 days consecutively. So this time, I'm not going to use all of my 5 days at once. I'm just going to spread it out. That way, everybody will have an opportunity to read it, and then please leave a review if you're able to. So I'm not going to go through this. I'm just going to read one section because a lot of people are saying that basically our predicament is hopeless, that there is no path for reparations, that um, we're basically politically irrelevant, which I guess it would be appropriate for me to address this section of my pamphlet because this addresses many people's concern. I don't think that our predicament is hopeless. Um, it's only hopeless to the extent that people are focusing on cash reparations and not focusing on sovereignty. But what you guys or many people seem to not understand is that sovereignty is the path to reparations. Um, you guys are going to have to read the pamphlet because I'm not going to explain everything. I want you to actually read it and actually think about this and then try to get organized, try to get people who can actually make this happen. But um, this whole defeatist attitude, and then you guys are basically peddling the same narrative, right? It's just monkey see, monkey do. There's no original thoughts going on. So, I mean, this is something. This is a completely different approach. I'm not sure why people are being dismissive. Nobody's really telling me that this is not possible. Nobody's telling me that this won't work. What I'm really getting is disengagement, right? People are just not they're not interested mainly because I think they just want to check. They don't necessarily want liberation, but you really can't get the check without liberation. So I'm sorry that people are that short-sighted and that superficial that they just want a check, which I guess I'm going to go ahead and get started because this section of this pamphlet addresses all of that. Sovereignty, the revolutionary imperative. The proper remedy for slavery is sovereignty, not a check. The reparations debate has been trapped in a wrong framework since its inception. Advocates for cash reparations as, excuse me, advocates for cash payment as reparations for slavery fundamentally misunderstand the nature of historically oppression. Gosh, y'all, I have it really small because I'm trying to squeeze it all into one screen, and so it's kind of hard for me to read. I don't want to make it larger because then I won't be able to see the entire screen. Let me read that over. Advocates for cash payments as reparations for slavery fundamentally misunderstand the nature of historical oppression and its proper remedy. Slavery was not merely economic exploitation. It was the systematic denial of self determination. The enslaved were property precisely because they lacked the sovereignty to control their own lives, communities, and futures. The proper remedy for slavery is not a check, it is freedom. And freedom entails sovereignty, the power to govern ourselves according to our own interests and values. Sovereignty is what was taken, and sovereignty is the debt that is owed. While cash payments can compensate people for unpaid labor, systematic oppression is irreparable. Cash reparations without sovereignty would leave ADOS subject to the same oppressive system which continues to oppress us. We will remain vulnerable to police violence, educational neglect, economic exploitation, and political marginalization because we would still lack the power to control the institutions that govern our lives. Sovereignty addresses the root cause of our oppression by giving us control over the systems that oppress us. When we control the police, police brutality ends. When we control the schools, educational failure ends. When we control the economy, discrimination ends. When we control the state, state oppression ends. The urgency of our situation. ADOS are becoming a politically irrelevant minority in the nation our ancestors built. We are shrinking as a percentage of the population while immigration dilutes the power of our votes. Democrats take our votes for granted, delivering nothing but empty promises election after election. Republicans ignore us altogether, knowing they can win without our support. We are trapped in a system where neither party needs to deliver meaningful change for our community. The mathematics of democracy work against us. We will never have enough votes to affect change at the national level. As immigration continues and our relative population share declines, our political leverage will only weaken further. With every election cycle, our influence diminishes while our conditions worsen. Gosh, I hate when it does this crap. Ugh. Every time I do it, it crashes. Let me see if I can get back to where I was. I'm sorry, y'all. Just 1 second. All right, here we were. Let me start. The mathematics of democracy work against us. We will never have enough votes to effect change at the national level. As immigration continues and our relative population shares decline, our political leverage will only weaken further. With every election cycle, our influence diminishes while our conditions worsen. Don't tell me this is crashing again. All right, y'all. Okay. We are investing our political capital in systems we do not own and do not control, expecting different results from the same rigged game. This trajectory leads to complete political irrelevance and permanent subjugation. We cannot afford to continue pouring our energy, votes, and resources into systems that extract value from our communities while delivering nothing in return. We need a safe place where we can be left alone and thrive without interference from those who benefit from our oppression. The only way we can remain politically relevant is by taking control over a state exercising sovereignty over a territory where our votes actually matter and our interests actually govern. Without sovereignty, we face not just continued oppression, but complete political extinction. Each year we delay, our window of opportunity closes further. Each election we participate in national politics without demanding sovereignty, we validate our own powerlessness. We must act now, and while we still have the numbers and resources to secure our own political future, we stand at a crossroads that will determine whether ADOS survive as a people or disappear into historical footnotes. We can continue the failed strategy of appealing to the majority for justice, or we can seize the power to ensure justice ourselves. The alternative to sovereignty is perpetual incrementalism disguised as progress token represent token representation that serves establishment interests while providing the illusion of advancement. Economic integration that enriches individual ADOS while keeping the community at large impoverished. Cultural assimilation that abandons our identity in exchange for acceptance by those who will never truly accept us. Or we can choose the path that every successful liberation movement has taken, the path to self determination. Now, this is the part that you guys really need to pay attention to the fantasy of a magical reparations debt. Those who proclaim that a debt is owed for slavery display a childish and uninformed misunderstanding of how power actually works. The delusional belief that a debt exists simply because powerless people declare it exists reveals fundamental ignorance of basic legal and political reality. There is no debt owed until a sovereign says there is a debt owed, and we are not sovereign. The foolish insistence that a debt exists because we say so demonstrates stunning political naivete. We are demanding payment of a debt that legally does not exist. The fact we think a debt is owed means absolutely nothing. Our proclamations about debt are the impotent ravings of the powerless, legally irrelevant and politically inconsequential. We possess no inherent rights as individuals. We only enjoy privileges that the state chooses to grant us. The sovereign is the true master of all property rights, and only the sovereign can declare debt exists through courts, through legislatures, through formal declarations of power. We have none of these. We are subjects, not sovereigns. Our opinions are legally meaninglessness excuse me, our opinion our opinions are legally meaningless. Our declarations are worthless noise. Demanding cash reparations from the state is like expecting God to compensate you for labor which God believes he was already entitled to. This is absurd because God determines right and wrong. God believes he is entitled to your labor because he believes you exist to serve him. You have no ability to hold God accountable unless you want to become a God yourself. Similarly, the state believes it is entitled to your labor and submission. We have no ability to hold the state accountable unless we become sovereign ourselves. And in the prologue, I actually explain in detail what sovereignty actually means. So you guys are going to have to read the pamphlet. Like I said, I am making it available tomorrow for free. But um, I think part of the problem is that a lot of people don't know what sovereignty actually means. They don't understand how important it is. Like sovereignty is everything. That's why I say in my conclusion that we should get sovereign or die trying. Reparations advocates often point to historical precedents to justify their hollow claims for cash reparations, but they miss the crucial factor that made these cases successful. Those who cite Japanese or Native American reparations don't understand that both groups had sovereignty back in their claims. Japan could pressure the US government as a sovereign nation. Native American tribes have federal recognition of their sovereignty. Jews received reparations from Germany only after establishing Israel as a sovereign state. Conversely, ADOS have no sovereign entity making demands on our behalf. Without sovereignty, we're just powerless subjects begging for handouts. And I want y'all to understand this. When I say this, it's not I guess y'all don't understand what I mean by that. What I'm saying is you don't have any rights, right? Your rights are privileges granted by the state. The sovereign is the master of all property. You don't actually own you don't have a right to property without sovereignty, right? The sovereign the, the tr- basically the sovereign really owns all property, but under the sovereign, you can have rights that are given to you. So without recognition by a sovereign, then you essentially don't have rights. Um, and so what it basically becomes a handout because you're asking your master to pay you reparations for services that the master believed it was already entitled to. It's not until a sovereign declares that it was wrong and that you are entitled to compensation, that you are entitled to reparations. Otherwise, it's a handout. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to be insulting, but the way that you guys are framing it is a handout. It's not my personal opinion. It is effectively a handout because you're not entitled to compensation from a sovereign when the sovereign is the hand of God. That's why I made the analogy that you're trying to sue God. You can't do it. You need to become sovereign first, and then you can make a case for reparations. So I hope that clears that up. It is a handout the way that you guys are framing it, or your approach that you just want to get cash reparations without getting sovereignty first. You can't get compensation for labor which didn't belong to you in the first place. So I want y'all to understand the position that you're in. You are arguing from a position of powerlessness, and you can't do it. The ADOS reparations movement fails because it misunderstands how politics actually functions. Politics doesn't work on shoulds, it works on power and rational self interest. Moral appeals are irrelevant to those who have power and benefit from maintaining the status quo. Only when we become sovereign can we declare that debts are owed and enforce their payment. Until then, all talk of reparation debt is just performative posturing, which sounds revolutionary but avoids the real work of actually seizing power. Why sovereignty trumps cash reparations? But there is a more compelling reason why sovereignty supersedes cash reparations. When you are sovereign, you can decide to give yourself reparations instead of begging. Emphasis on the word begging. Instead of begging the majority to agree to give them to you, you have the ability to write your own check. There is a fundamental difference between writing your own check and asking someone to give you a check while leaving it to them to figure out how to make it work, how to create a budget, how to fund essential government services, how to balance competing priorities. When you are sovereign, you earn respect because you have to do the work. You must create the budget, balance the books, and ensure adequate funding for essential services while still delivering reparations. People respect a case for reparations when you are the one who has to figure out how to make it actually work, as opposed to making demands while expecting someone else to do the thinking for you. This is the very type of childless helplessness and dependency which people use to justify our oppression in the first place. Sovereignty forces us to demonstrate competence, responsibility, and self reliance, the very qualities that command respect and legitimize our claim for liberation. This distinction reveals the inherent futility of the cash reparations approach. Every proposal for monetary reparations requires the consent of the majority, the very people whose ancestors and institutions created and maintained this system of oppression. Cash reparations puts us in a degrading position of beggars, hat in hand, pleading our case to those who profit from our subjugation. We are reduced to making moral appeals to the morally bankrupt, asking for justice from those who have built their wealth on our exploitation. Even if such payments were granted, they would represent scraps from their table, not justice from our own hand. Moreover, remaining under their control while demanding reparations is itself a waiver of any legitimate claim to compensation. By accepting their continued governance over us, we send the message that we consent to the system which oppresses us. How can we simultaneously claim to be victims of their system while voluntarily remaining subject to it, especially when we have a viable alternative? Our willingness to stay under their authority undermines any moral claim we might have to reparations. It suggests we find our current subjugation tolerable and that we are okay with it. There is nothing respectable about begging for money while remaining content living under systemic oppression. The dominant society would respect us more if we demanded sovereignty, if we had the dignity to say we will no longer accept their rule rather than asking them to pay us to tolerate it. The sovereignty approach commands respect because it is a demand to be treated as equals, not as subjects. It shows we value freedom and that we can't be bought. Sovereignty reverses the power dynamic entirely. A sovereign people doesn't grovel for reparations. They determine what reparations are owed and implement them. They don't beg for the terms to remedy their oppression. They set those terms for themselves. They don't prostate themselves for others to decide their worth. They assert it through their own institutions and policies. Consider the practical implications. A sovereign ADOS state could implement universal basic income, free healthcare, free education, land redistribution, or any other forms of reparative policy without requiring a single vote from the dominant society. We could establish our own banks that don't discriminate, our own schools that don't miseducate our children, our own police force that protect rather than terrorize our communities. We could write checks to ourselves, and not just once, but continuously through policies that serve our interests rather than exploit them. Cash reparations, by contrast, are purely transactional and operate entirely within the existing power structure. Worse, they strengthen it. This transactional approach treats centuries of systematic oppression as a business deal that can be settled with a one time payment. Even if massive payments were made, the fundamental relationship remains unchanged. They control the institutions, we receive their largesse. But the perversity runs deeper than temporal wealth transfers. Every dollar of reparations would flow right back into the same oppressive system that exploited us in the first place. We would spend our reparations at their businesses, deposit our checks in their banks, pay rent to their landlords, buy insurance from their companies. The very act of receiving cash reparations would force us to fund our own continued oppression. The oppressive institutions would not only claw back every dollar through discriminatory lending, predatory taxation, or economic manipulation, they would profit from the transaction. We would literally pay them to oppress us using money they gave us as supposed compensation for that oppression. It is a circular feeding system designed to maintain their control while pretending to fix the problem. Without sovereignty, reparations becomes a cynical wealth recycling program that leaves the underlying power imbalance not just intact but financially reinforced. This is why sovereignty not only makes more sense than cash reparations, it makes cash reparations a humiliating distraction. Why grovel for others to compensate you when you can compensate yourself? Why beg for a plate, why beg for a piece of their pie when you can own the bakery and produce your own pie? Why debase yourself to accepting their definition of what you're owed when you could determine your own wealth? The sovereignty argument exposes the cash reparations debate for what it truly is, a fool's errand that keeps us dependent on those who put their own interests first, as they should. It transformed the question from how much do they owe us to why are we groveling before them instead of taking control ourselves. It shifts us from the language of debt and payment, the language of beggars, to the language of freedom and self determination. Most importantly, it moves us from the pathetic position. Good Lord. I hope this comes up. If not, you guys are just going to have to read the book. Okay, here we are. I wish I could have downloaded it first as a PDF, but it wouldn't allow me to do that. And I was almost finished anyway. Let me read that whole paragraph over. The sovereignty argument exposes the cash reparations debate for what it truly is, a fool's errand that keeps us dependent on those who put their own interests first, as they should. It transformed the question from how much do they owe us to why are we groveling before them instead of taking control ourselves. It shifts us from the language of debt and payment, the language of beggars, to the language of freedom and self determination. Most importantly, it moves us from a pathetic position of dependence on others' priorities to a position of independence through our own power. Sovereignty is the ultimate reparation because it contains within itself the power to grant all other reparations. Everything else puts us back on the auction block, but this time we're the ones selling ourselves, our ancestors, and our children. Let me see if there's anybody still here. Okay. Um, so like I said, I'm making this available tomorrow, and I'll probably make it available again. But I need you guys to read the pamphlet and actually give me some feedback. I need you to give me some reviews. Um, I feel like right now there's this engagement that nobody's telling me that I'm wrong. They're just basically acting as if this hasn't been presented, and they're still continuing on with the same tired cash reparations narrative, which is not getting us anywhere. You know it's not working, and you're still going. I mean, the definition of insanity is repeating the same action ad nauseum and expecting a different result. You're not going to get you're not going to get cash reparations with the approach that you're taking. You know you're not. And for whatever reason, you're being dismissive and you're not really engaging with what I'm saying. And I think it's very frustrating. But at the end of the day, only thing I can do is present the solution. You guys can decide what you want to do with it. I feel like if you guys are willing to make the effort, then I can try to meet you halfway and try to actually make this happen. But the first step is for you guys to recognize that you can't get reparations without sovereignty. There's just no way around it. I don't know why you're trying to shortchange yourself and just seek cash reparations when you should be seeking something bigger. Um, Again, I think it's because you guys don't understand what sovereignty means. Or I mean, I'm not trying to be insulting, but you don't understand that you are in a position of powerlessness. You don't have any leverage. Your opinion doesn't matter. You are becoming politically irrelevant. So, sovereignty is the first step to getting reparations. I don't think cash reparations should be the end goal anyway. It should be liberation, socially and economically. But you guys want to be short sighted and focus on cash reparations. I really don't know what to tell you. You're not going to get it with the approach that you're taking. With that being said, I'm going to end this live stream. Thank you for listening to the Black Anarchist Podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The struggle is real, and the fight for liberation is far from over.